What do you give to a hungry little patriot?
So we left off with how the weapon system was stripped back. Another system stripped back are the player upgrades, which is through static incremental increases for your health, shield and salt, in addition to clothing pieces which offer certain bonuses, most of which are fairly specific, such as being related to sky rails or melee attacks. Even more annoyingly, while the gear has set stats, the majority of which you find are randomized, which further takes away from the customization in using gear. Just left with the hope you find something which caters to your playstyle or is useful at all. This is almost the complete antithesis to Bioshock, which offered a large variety of passive character upgrades and granted you control over playstyle. The exploration can be summarized quite simply as, yeah, still no real depth to it. You're going to take everything regardless, perhaps avoiding the items which take away health for salt and vice versa, but you can still appreciate the effort in making it not completely a linear experience and being able to find vox recordings to flesh out the world better. Ciphers were a huge disappointment though. While they introduces something that may require the player to actually think later in the game, with the initial puzzle being very easy under the assumption it will get harder, instead has the solution given to you as soon as you bring the cipher back to the code. If they were just going to do this, and there wasn't really a point to having it in the first place. Similar to the lockpicking system, in the earlier parts of the game the tougher locks took 5 to open, which was proportionate to the amount of picks found up until that point, as a reward for you exploring everywhere, and this could have remained a nice incentive to do so as the game progressed. However, the further you got in the game, the locks started requiring only 3 picks, and you were given an immense amount of them to use. I had a crazy amount left over by the end of the game. Can you see a pattern here? When one form of mechanic is stripped back and simplified, the same is done to others because it can no longer facilitate what it once was. Now understand that I'm not praising the first Bioshock as the greatest thing to grace gaming since Pong, and I'm certainly not inferring that I wanted Infinite to play exactly the same as it did. It had its fair share of problems too. However, it just isn't apparent to me that they made any effort to improve the past mechanics, rather opting to simplify them into more generic territory and overall rendering a less memorable gameplay experience. Anyway, moving on. If the game wasn't simple enough, the newly introduced tear system is here to aid you, allowing you to bring in objects from other dimensions, of course only useful things. Now to me, this just seems like another frivolous addition by adding no real tactical value to the combat. If you think about it, a majority of the objects you can bring in should have just been there to begin with, maybe with a reduction of salt and health, and you still should have had to rely on your possession power to take over the various mechanical enemies, as opposed to having a friendly one which you can infinitely replenish upon its death. This, coupled with Elizabeth tossing you items gathered from inexplicable places, appears to be an attempt at keeping her relevant in the combat, but ultimately takes away from the challenge. The last thing I want to touch on are the enemies. While I'm satisfied with the variety, there are 2 notable problems. The AI isn't always fully responsive, and I often found the Patriots, those large robot enemies, getting caught on walls while trying to navigate around them. Also, there were several instances where the human enemies ignore me completely, or got distracted easily. Or had stormtrooper moments where they couldn't aim properly. What's the deal with the stagnation in artificial intelligence for shooters anyway? I haven't seen any massive improvements with it since about 8 years ago, but hey, that's for another video. The other issue is with the handyman encounters, which regrettably didn't provide the same amount of challenge or excitement fighting Big Daddies in Bioshock did. They have an obvious weak point, and as long as you have the salt to stun them with the murder of crows, there's really not much they can do to you. Bioshock Infinite grants us, for the most part, an engaging story with 2 lead characters which you care about in an exciting world filled with vibrant colours and unique environments. It's such a shame that they couldn't provide the same amount of love and attention in the actual gameplay to perhaps rightfully earn a perfect score. If you re-watch the 15-minute gameplay demo, as heavily scripted as it is, it shows something with more promising potential and ambition than what we received, and it's clear to see where they've scaled back quite heavily. It occurred to me recently that the largest problem with giving a game a perfect score is that you're telling the developers that they can't do any better. This incites the ideal that they don't need to improve or try to innovate, but hey, let's be honest, you don't need to in today's market. People don't seem to care about games evolving as much as keeping them easy, and frequently rewarding the player. I can't say I have much hope in the upcoming DLCs rectifying any of the problems I've mentioned, but only time will tell at this point.